Welcome to the Chief Justice Commission on Professionalism historical video series. We will be interviewing outstanding lawyers, judges, and legal scholars who have exemplified the principles of professionalism throughout their career. I am here today in Buies Creek, North Carolina, to interview Dr. Norman A. Wiggins, President of Campbell University. My name is Mel Wright, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. Dr. Wiggins' resume is the most impressive I've ever seen. It's approximately 7 pages long, and I'm not going to read the entire resume, but I am going to read a portion of it so you'll understand what an outstanding lawyer, legal educator he has been throughout his career. Dr. Norman Adrian Wiggins, President of Campbell University, is a native of Burlington, North Carolina. After completion of high school, he received his AA from Campbell College and his BA from Wake Forest College, where he was a magna cum laude graduate. Dr. Wiggins received his LLB from Wake Forest College School of Law, cum laude, and his LLM and JSD from Columbia University School of Law. His 33 years as president of Campbell University place him in a unique position for university presidents. Dr. Wiggins has authored 3 books: Wills and Administration of Estates in North Carolina, Estates and Trust Functions and Services. He is former editor of the North Carolina Wills Manual and is a contributor to many legal periodicals. Dr. Wiggins served for 4 years in the United States Marine Corps. His distinguished awards during the last 10 years include Distinguished Service Awards from the Newcomen Society of America, the National Association of College and University Attorneys, the Commander's Award for Public Service, the International Freedom of Mobility Award. He and his wife, Mildred Millie Harmon Wiggins, reside in Keith Hills, just off the University of Campbell campus. A former president of the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina, Dr. Wiggins finds time to place the Lord first in his life. He is the former president of the North Carolina Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, the National Association of College and University Attorneys, the Association of Presidents of Independent Colleges and Universities, the North Carolina Association of Colleges and Universities, the Southern Baptist Sunday School Board, and the National Fellowship of Baptist Men. Dr. Wiggins, thanks for being with us today.
Delighted to be here, Melvin. Thank you for coming.
Dr. Wiggins, when did you first decide to become a lawyer?
Well, you know, I don't know that there was anything like the Damascus Road experience of Paul, but it's developed in the First Baptist Church over in Burlington, North Carolina, where I attended from the time, I guess, that my father could carry me there until I left there to come down to Campbell to study. And my church was really filled with lawyers. They were my Sunday school teachers. They were superintendents in the school. They were, a couple of them were teachers for my father. One was a distinguished judge, a Superior Court judge, maybe one of the most distinguished in North Carolina. I'd have to say that my interest in law evolved out of my relationship with those people in a church setting, and I tended to look on law as being synonymous with Christian service, and so I guess it came from there, and it tended to grow as I associated at other levels in the Marine Corps and other places with good Christian lawyers, and I came to have an appreciation for the people who were lawyers and for the profession itself.
We know from your resume that you went from Campbell College to Wake Forest Law School. When you finished law school, where did you choose to practice law, and why did you choose that location?
Well, I don't know how the lawyers felt about it, but for those of us who were working closely with the lawyers, I thought it was an ideal time to be in the practice of law. Lawyers still were, at that point in time, were still the stalwarts of society in the sense that they had a great influence on what the communities were going to be or were. And they did a lot of charitable work We talk about pro bono work today. Pro bono work was known to them and accepted as a fact back in those days. The bar was a little smaller than it is now, and those people tended to know one another. They had mutual respect for one another. There were some lawyer jokes back in those days, but they were jokes, really, and people highly respected the lawyers of the community, and I was in an area where you had people like Battle, Winslow, and Merrill, the Thorpe brothers. Over in Enfield, we had Joe Branch. We had back in Rocky Mount, Stronach Wilkinson and Mr. J.P. Bunn, just a group of outstanding lawyers. Tom Deal from the legislature was there. So I was dealing with people at that level while I was working with the planners before the call came to go to Wake Forest.
Did you have anyone at that particular time that you considered a mentor in your early practice? And do you think it's important for young lawyers today to have mentors?
Well, I had several good mentors. Of course, I never did lose my relationship with Dean Weathers. He was a mentor from the time I got into law school until the time till the time of his demise, really, because there weren't many things of importance I didn't discuss with him. I had a mentor in Dr. Beverly Lake, who was my advisor when I went up from Campbell. In fact, he became the advisor for both of us. Millie and I went up together. We're from Campbell here. We met here, married here, went up there as students, and Dr. Beverly Lake took over as my advisor on the undergraduate level, preparing us for law school. And I'll tell you, he wouldn't let you take any easy courses. And then I met Mr. Gilbert Stevenson, the gentleman I referred to a moment ago, out of the trust business, a lawyer in his own right, a Wake Forest lawyer, Harvard lawyer, a man who had real legal skills, a great writer. And before too many years, he and I became writers. I started working with him, assisting him in his writings, and then we became co-authors on some articles together. Then, so all in all, you take those people and add on someone such as Justice Branch, who became Justice Branch. He was an attorney in Enfield at the time I knew him. And these other people, Mr. Winslow and Mr. Battle and Mr. Herman Merrill, who was president of the North Carolina Bar Association, those kind of people tended to mold us in those days. They were mentors, good mentors, and told us what we ought to do, and we followed what they told us.
When did you decide to return to Wake Forest Law School, and why did you make that decision to return?
Well, I actually returned and joined the school when it was moved from the old campus to the new campus and joined them in Winston-Salem, but that wasn't when I actually was invited to go back. I was invited to go back in December of 1954, but I asked for an extension of time from Dean Weathers to allow me to do what I should do and what I should have done, and that was to finish out my commitment with the people at the Planners Bank, who had been very good to us. I had gone to Dean Weathers to talk to him about going into the practice of law in Richmond, Virginia, where an invitation had come to come up for an interview, when he told me of his interest in my coming with the law faculty at Wake Forest. Having Dean Weathers as one of my mentors and the other members of the faculty for whom I had the highest respect, and having my friend Jim Sizemore, who had already gone there as professor of law, it was a natural place for us to go, and Millie was enthusiastic about it. She was a graduate of Wake Forest and loved the place, so we decided that if they invited us, we would go, and they did, and I asked for an extension of time to get in my residence at Columbia University for my master's and my doctorate. Went there and finished my master's and then started to work on my doctorate, and went on down to Winston-Salem and joined the school when it moved from the old campus to the new campus. So it was a happy day for us, and was happy throughout the time we were there. Those were 11 good years.
Dr. Wiggins, when you were a student at Wake Forest Law School, were there certain principles of professionalism that were passed on to you as a student? And did you in turn try to instill those same principles in your students?
Well, I would say, notwithstanding the fact that I think the level of scholarship at Wake Forest was probably one of the highest, and maybe not known as well, but one of the highest in the nation at the time, I think the level of professionalism, and that's what you have reference to, ethics and morals and things of this nature, I think were held in equally high esteem by the faculty there. It was practiced by the faculty, certainly by the dean and his people. Dean Weathers was known for being the model of legal ethics, if you want to put it in those terms. And I felt that if we were going to turn out people who could serve the public as they should serve it and maintain respect and dignity for the law, that they would have to be taught those same things that I was taught about ethical and moral principles. Academic excellence is mandatory throughout all of education, but if we don't take care of the professionalism responsibilities, we will not be good lawyers and the profession will not be in good shape. And I passed those on as best I could to all the students I dealt with.
Dr. Wiggins, do you see a difference between the practice of law today than when you began practicing law?
Well, I think so. I think one thing is that we have large firms today, and those can be both a blessing, and I guess at times they can be a problem. We certainly practice law a little differently. The firms that we were acquainted with in those early days didn't have offices in Atlanta and Washington and places like that. But with the communications being what they are today, the methods of communications and channels of communication, we can conduct practices that way. Now, I think that's a blessing in the sense that our businesses today cross state boundaries, and often they cross national boundaries and go into other countries. And I think it's helpful. I think by the same token, when we get large firms, it's probably more difficult for the members of the firm to have that same sort of esprit de corps and friendliness that they had in the days when law firms tended to be smaller.
And as a result, do you see a difference today in the roles attorneys are playing in their communities than when you first began practicing?
Well, I think, attorneys do so much for our nation today, even now, that I would say regretfully that many attorneys are not as involved in the leadership of the community and setting the tone for the direction of the community as they seemed to be when I was coming along, because we looked to attorneys more for that direction. In my day, when I was back in my church, as I mentioned, in the city of Burlington, and we looked for it in the 50s when I got out of law school, we have plenty of attorneys who still render tremendous community service and a good deal of leadership, but not to the same extent that we had it at an earlier time, I don't think. And so I do think there's been some changes there.
Dr. Wiggins, what advice would you give today to students and law students about whether or not to make the practice of law their career?
Well, I guess I'm so enthusiastic about it that I wouldn't be a good one to advise, but when you think about the fact that lawyers, if you get beyond, if you'll pardon the expression, if you'll get beyond L.A. law and get beyond the TV, and these things have some things to teach us also, but if you get beyond that, you will find that lawyers are really the builders of society. They have been in past times, and they are now, to much more than we sometimes acknowledge. Also, I think they stand as a bulwark for those freedoms that we think are important and that distinguish this society. And I can't imagine anyone who doesn't mind working hard, and I put a heavy emphasis on hard work, doesn't mind working hard and wants to help people, and it has a servant attitude about him, servanthood attitude, I should say, I guess. I can't see why he wouldn't be attracted to the law, because the law still offers all of those possibilities. And if you go where I have been in the last 20 years around the world, literally, because I go to Malaysia every summer and we travel around to other countries, and you see what we have that those countries don't have, you have to know that the law is responsible for a lot of the good things that we enjoy, and a lot of those countries are not prospering to the degree that they would and do not have the freedoms that we enjoy because the lawyers have not taken that role in those countries. And I can state that pretty clearly about the Russian society, where I went with one of my colleagues here from the law school, Dr. Buzzard, and some other lawyers to help educate the people who were going to take over when Yeltsin took over the government over there, and to try to bring democracy to Russia. And I saw it explicitly in those cases. And yes, I can't think of anything that's more thrilling or something that you could give your life to, for which you could have a greater passion than the study of law, unless it is a ministry.
Dr. Wiggins, after being at Wake Forest Law School for approximately 11 years, you decided to come back to Campbell University as president. Can you tell us why you decided to make that move?
Well, it was not an easy decision. I was very happy where I was, and I suspect that the people who were on the Presidential Selection Committee would tell you that it took a long time for me to come to that decision. But I had come to Campbell right out of high school. I had been here as a scholar, athletic scholar, you might say, or an athlete who had a scholarship, to come to play football, basketball, and baseball. I met my wife here after I had gone off and served a tour in the Marine Corps, and Campbell was here in eastern North Carolina, and they were needing to fill a vacuum that had been created when Wake Forest moved to the Knolls of Forsyth from the great forest of Wake, as we like to say. And it seemed proper, after about 2 months of very serious prayerful consideration, to come here and see what I could do. And I felt so secure where I was that I told them that I would come and stay 5 years. And after 5 years, I would go back into the teaching profession, where I thought I was called to be.
Dr. Wiggins, after being back at Campbell for a period of time, we know that you started a law school here. Can you tell us how that concept evolved and what went into a decision to create a law school at Campbell?
Well, let me say, since you've asked that question, put on record so all will understand, I didn't come here with an idea of starting a law school. I didn't think about it. It wasn't part of the plan that we had. Actually, the law school came about as a result of a number of people saying that North Carolina needed another law school. We were underserved in a lot of places in North Carolina. And I had a number of legislators and other influential citizens of the state, including some presidents of both private institutions and public institutions, who indicated they thought that the law school should be started here, located close to the capital city, and that we had a mission to fill in this part. And we took as our mission, one of our missions, to put lawyers in underserved areas. And there were some underserved areas in North Carolina, and there still are. But we have done a job to putting a good job, I think, in putting young lawyers in those areas and enabling them to offer legal services to people at a fee that they can afford. And we're very pleased with it. And I'm just grateful that we went forward with that plan when we were encouraged to do so by so many people.
Dr. Wiggins, when you began the law school at Campbell, were the elements of professionalism, such things as civility and ethics and honesty and integrity and pro bono service and public service, were those elements that you thought were important to the curriculum here at Campbell Law School?
Let me say this. We decided that Campbell's Law School, if it were going, we had 3 good law schools, and we decided if Campbell Law School were going to really serve, it had to fill a different niche. And we thought there was a niche open, and we decided that we would build a law school that would be new and in some respects would be different, and we'd superimpose upon the traditional curriculum of a law school additional studies that would give graduates a greater state of readiness when they went out. And we decided also that we would try to help these graduates have an understanding and appreciation for the majesty of the law, the dignity of the law. And we said, as part of our differences, we wanted to let the law school curriculum and the study program be built around our belief on the divinity of Christ, our dedication to the Constitution, which we are greatly dedicated to, both in the law school and in our undergraduate programs in government. And we wanted it also to be built on the idea that man is not a creature of the state, but a creature of God, and that we ought to have concern about the individual as a creature of God, as opposed to being a creature of the state. And I didn't know it at the time, but after having visited in Russia and a number of other places, I realized that those were fairly good foundation stones.
Dr. Wiggins, judges have always been held in high regard in the legal system, as well they should be. Do you think that they are an important part of the professionalism movement today?
I don't know anyone that can do better for our profession than judges speaking out on the matters and the need for professionalism. I happened to come up in a church where one of the distinguished judges was Judge Leo Carr of the Superior Court. And of course, my longtime teacher and personal friend, Judge Beverly Lake, was on the Supreme Court after he left the law school and some other jobs as Attorney General, positions as Attorney General. So I've been close to judges for a long, long time. I think they speak with authority. I think they are people who are respected, or they wouldn't be in the judgeship position that they hold. I think the people in public generally have great confidence in them. That it's true in North Carolina, I'm sure, and I think it's true most all places. They're people known for impartiality and their seriousness about matters of ethics, and they're the people that can really teach professionalism when they're off that bench and when they're on that bench, because they have to practice it in the courtroom and teach it when they're out of the courtroom.
Dr. Wiggins, what advice do you give to third-year law students when they get ready to go out and begin the practice of law? And what advice would you give to young lawyers today about how to practice law?
Well, the first thing I would want them to do is to have an attitude of service. I think law has always been characterized by people who would go the first mile of duty and the second mile of service. I feel that these young lawyers going out ought to go out with that sense of calling, if you will. I thought and still believe that I was called into the legal profession. Now, that may be old-fashioned for some people, but it's not for me, and I don't think it would be for them. If they can see the dignity and the majesty of the law and how it creates stability for our society, then they won't have any difficulty in going out and knowing that first they've got to work hard. You know, if you go back to the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch didn't live in the largest house in the community, and he didn't have the best car in the community. But he sure knew how to hold up a principle in what I would consider to have been a bigoted society of that time. And he had to stand, and that's the way he won his part of his compensation, was to be highly respected. I believe it was Reverend Sykes in To Kill a Mockingbird that told the little girl, Louise Jean at the time, said, "Stand up, honey, your daddy's passed." That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Absolutely. Dr. Wiggins, when you remember certain men and women that you considered great lawyers, what was it about them, in your opinion, that made them so outstanding?
Well, I think their sense of service has always distinguished the people that I've known. Every person I've known who's been a mentor to me, and the people I've been associated with from the time that I was in Sunday school to the present time, the one thing that seems to stand out in all of their lives not only a high level of attainment and scholarship. These are people who are really, truly great scholars in their own right, but they have a sense of calling, a sense of service, and the idea that they are going to go out and make society a better place. And these are the kind of people who do this. If you don't have a passion for law, you've got to have a passion for something in life. You can't have too many passions. If you do, you'll kill yourself. But if you have a passion for law, and you know the background of the law, you know it's about having an orderly society. And we settle things by way of law instead of fighting it out on the battlefield. And that's a great mission.
Dr. Wiggins, you've been truly remarkable in your service to others. And this may be a tough question for you, but what do you consider your greatest contributions and achievements?
Well, I think they're the same as probably any other who is a teacher. I don't consider myself as an administrator. I consider myself as a teacher on leave doing administrative work. But in the course of doing administrative work, which is a high calling in itself, I think I have the opportunity to help young people who otherwise would not have access to Campbell University or some other school. I think we have to go the second mile in trying to help our faculty members be able to afford, they can't make what they can make outside, but be able to afford to stay here and teach and commit their lives to this, knowing full well that in so doing that perhaps materially speaking they will not do as well, but from the standpoint of the enjoyment of the journey, that they'll get a great deal of enjoyment and live a full life if they stay and serve other people. And I think serving other people and making education available, if I have done anything, I would like to think that maybe those two things would constitute those things that I consider very important.
Dr. Wiggins, thank you for being with us today and for all you've done for the lawyers and the people
Thank
of
you
North
for
Carolina.
letting me